Everything you just saw was shot with this, the macro effects filter from Prism Lens FX. I feel like we all have a basic understanding of how the focus on a lens works, right? So you turn it one direction and you rack focus to infinity, for shooting a mountain range off in the distance or a city skyline, or you rack the lens the other way to rack the focus to the foreground to film your subject or an object in front of you. That's essentially how a lens works. The thing though that's tricky is a lot of lenses have a close focus. I remember shooting a lot as a cinematographer. I'd be shooting on these old vintage anamorphics and the close focus was like 3 to 5 feet. So if the subject was any closer to 3 to 5 feet, it would be out of focus. And why this is an issue is sometimes in the shot list, you have shots that require you to get an insert of someone typing on a keyboard, or maybe an insert of someone sending a text message. To get the camera like 6 inches away from the subject or object you're shooting is difficult, especially like I said, when your lens has a minimum focus of 3 to 5 feet. And really the only solve for this problem is to get a specialty lens, right? Like a probe lens or a macro lens. And the tricky thing is these lenses are really expensive to buy. Some of them are thousands of dollars. So alternatively, that's why we created the macro effects filter from Prism Lens FX. It essentially turns any lens in your kit, it could be a prime lens, it could be a zoom lens, a wide lens, a tight lens, any lens in your kit that has outer threads, it essentially turns it into a macro lens. And essentially how it works is there's 2 different strengths, the full and the half. The full has a similar magnification to a +10 diopter, and the half has a similar magnification to a +4 diopter. And I think the easiest way of explaining how these work is it'd be like grabbing like a magnifying glass that Sherlock Holmes puts up to his eye to inspect something, but essentially it's a threadable filter that does just the same thing. So it allows you to expand a lens in your kit to be able to shoot objects that are inches away from your camera. And one of the things I noticed when using and testing out the macro effects filter is the edges have a slight edge blur depending on the focal length you're on, and a slight chromatic aberration. And me personally, I kind of find that this is a characteristic that I've seen on older vintage lenses. So to kind of also see that the macro effects introduces these little lens characteristics as well is kind of fun. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I like to just shoot with one lens. I kind of come from more of an economical cinematographer where, I like to just sort of find a zoom, leave it on the camera and not really fuss. And, I guess the reason from that, coming from a background of music videos and documentaries, anytime you're pulling the lens off and pulling the focus motors off and finding the lens case in the truck, that's lost time. You're losing time and not getting shots, you're missing moments. So for me, leaving the lens on the camera as much as possible, and instead, if I needed to get a macro shot or a detail shot, instead of like switching to a macro and probe lens, just being able to thread on something like the macro effects filter from Prism Lens FX, I can just keep the lens on the camera, I can thread this on, and I can get the close-up detail shots I need, and I can kind of keep it moving essentially, Not only that, but to rent or buy a macro probe lens can put you out a couple $1,000s, and this filter is 50 to 60 bucks. So if you're interested in learning more, head on over to PrismLensFX.com to check it out. Anyways, keep it in camera.